My name is Mike Hunter, and here is my contribution to the pandemic kitchen parties that are all the rage just now, except that those kitchen parties are exclusively for music, and music is not my forte. Stories are part of the kitchen party tradition too, so I want to share one or two of those. There is, by the way, a Facebook group for Nova Scotia kitchen party music. By all means, check it out. We live here in beautiful West Bay, Cape Breton, and since moving here 4 years ago, I've been working on a collection of short fiction, tentatively titled Local Colour, Stories from the Landing and Elsewhere. The Landing is a fictional village, loosely based on local geography and a few local histories and some anecdotes, all greatly exaggerated, of course, and most attempting to highlight and honor the deep but somewhat overgrown culture of the Highland Gaels, who steaded the Bredor Lakes watershed here 100+ years ago. Most of the stories in the collection are humorous, I hope. Some are not. This story is not, I hope, except for a few little quips here and there. Like most of the collection, this story is set against the backdrop of Scots-Gaelic culture. I call it MacTalla, the echo, that being the Gaelic, if my pronunciation's okay, and the English meaning. Mac-Talla, by the way, was the name of a 19th century Scots-Gaelic newspaper published here in Cape Breton. A much earlier version of this story was in answer to a writing challenge in which the genre and a few random details were prescribed, from which competitors were to craft a short story over a period of a week. I think the requisites were, if I remember correctly, speculative fiction, a genre that doesn't really interest me, an audition, and dirty fingernails of all things. Anyway, my entry failed to make the cut, thank heavens, but I thought there was a kernel of something better there, and I went back to it several times over the last couple of years, resulting in what I'm sharing with you here. I've broken it into 2 parts because it's about a half hour long, and added a few images to alleviate a half hour of talking head, my talking head. At the end of the second installment is a slide with credits for the images used, and give thanks up front here to Peter Rose for assisting with the entire process. I do have a few flash fiction stories on a blog if you're interested, and a few rants and musings. I've also posted an audio-only version, is that called a podcast? Accessible from that blog. Just Google Mike R. Hunter at Blogspot, and I'll probably post a few more stories in the coming weeks. Feel free to share if you like it. Well, share it anyway. Just don't say anything if you don't like it. So, here is part 1 of MacTalla, the echo. Remember this one? Money doesn't grow on trees, you know. I told my kids that sometimes, sounding like my father, echoing him when he would tell us that no, we're not going to spend precious money on the latest device by which you can further ignore us. We don't dare use those old recriminations on our grandchildren, though, partly because their next generation digital distractions are way beyond our comprehension. Kids have lots of time for watching YouTube or for flitting gossip on Snapchat, but no time to sit with their grandparents, even at mealtime. And at my age, time is a more precious resource than money, which gives rise to another overused parentism. Time is money. Time out, time up, waste of time, time waits for no one, the time has come, time to reap, time to sow, bedtime, overtime, downtime. It would not be a stretch in our current state to mash up those 2 overused sayings to say that time doesn't grow on trees, you know, except when it does. Just such a conflict arose for us and came close to home a couple of years ago when my dad died unexpectedly. Well, it wasn't so much unexpected. He was old. Old people die. But we were unprepared. What was unexpected was the heart attack. Not his, mine. Now, it would be a stretch to say that the heart attack, was the best thing that ever happened to me, But it was a wake-up call, one that I needed and one that I decided to heed. And that's how it came to be that we moved out here. My father grew up out here in the Landing, a village on the west bay of Loch Brador. Like dozens of places in Cape Breton, the Landing got smaller and smaller during the last century, although unlike some places that have all but disappeared, the Landing is still here, still home to descendants of the early settlers, Highland Gaels mostly, though we are fewer and we are older. The village shrank until it no longer suited my dad's generation and they moved away, along with most of their peers. In one of those coincidences that Maritimers well know, my parents met in Toronto, which is where my mother grew up. Her parents, my Toronto grandparents, were actually from here in the Landing, but had left the area many years before. Some sort of falling out with over religion or politics or property inheritance or something. If the subject ever came up among our elders, the conversation would switch to a knowing whisper or to the Gaelic, if they had it, leaving out the younger generations. Neither my mother nor her parents ever visited the Landing. The only tangible connection she had with her family was a faded photograph of her grandparents, my great-grandparents. In that picture, the dour pair were sitting near the doorway of a smallish, shingled frame house. She sat at a rickety-looking spinning wheel. He seated next to her, holding an ancient set of bagpipes. When they retired, my mother and father moved to the Landing to live in my father's house. Mum died some years later, leaving him to keep the fires burning. We and our children made the long drive from Toronto to spend vacation time here in the summers. Then when my dad died and I was advised to retire, the available house in a rural setting seemed to be just what the doctor ordered. The old place wasn't much to look at, but it has good bones and a good heart. Once we got rid of some of the worn-out furniture and my grandmother's prized cranberry glass goblets, and after refurbishing and refurnishing, we settled into a comfortable existence here. It turns out I'm a romantic at heart. Out here in the Landing, the history envelops you, the ghosts speak to you. The area was once populated almost exclusively by Gaels, as I said. For more than 100 years, small farms and orchards lined the spaces between the mountain behind us and the loch in front. For more than 100 years, only Gaelic and Mi'kmaq were spoken in these parts. In the 100 years since, neither. Once a bustling, industrious lochside town, there are now more overgrown stone foundations and fences than occupied homes, and only ghosts tend the now feral orchards. My father never learned it, the Gaelic that is, nor did my mother, and I didn't have any interest, nor did any of my friends whose parents or grandparents spoke it, beyond the few pat phrases spoken in front of tourists and at funerals. To my discredit, while I was proud of my Highland roots, like countless of my generation, I wasn't proud enough to do anything in earnest about it, beyond those phrases, and beyond singing along with Irish drinking songs that sounded about right. As a youngster, I did learn to play the bagpipes, after a fashion, which is to say not very well. I even played in a marching band for a while. The band helped to obscure my lack of talent, I thought, but it made my mother proud to see me all kilted out and marching smartly in formation in the cold rain of Remembrance Day parades. There's a fair amount of interest in Celtic cultures in urban areas. Highland dancing, marching pipe bands, though purists call it tokenism. People fetishize bagpipes, kilts, and imitation sealskin sporrans and cheer on addressed to the haggis at burn suppers. But they don't go much beyond that, or beyond displaying their well-worn copies of A Forest for Callum and No Great Mischief under family pictures on an end table in the parlor. To my regret and maturity, my adolescent years in the city traded marching in skirts for chasing after skirts, and the pipes were abandoned. Then came kids and dogs, and you get the idea. My parents, bless them, had kept my abandoned bagpipes. We found them in their case among a jumble of old suitcases, trunks, and cartons in the attic of the old house. You can probably see where this is going. Old history, old house, old heart, old pipes. One slight problem. As an adult, I can't carry a tune in a bag, let alone coax a tune out of a bag. But I had as a kid, so looking for some sort of cultural hobby, I decided to try. I bought instruction videos, watched endless YouTube concerts and amateur instruction clips, listened in rapture to mass pipe CDs in preparation. Alone in the shed, I practiced like the videos said, on a practice chanter. It was like learning a new language. And like learning a new language, I was a long time working up the courage to try chanter and bag together, and then to try it out on anyone. It turned out I wasn't quite ready to give a house concert. The first was also the last. Apparently there's a little-known codicil to the marriage vows, a footnote that reads, "No bagpipe playing in the matrimonial home." My wife suggested that if I wanted to commune with my ancestors, I take up genealogy. There's an old joke that a true gentleman knows how to play the bagpipes, but doesn't. The dog returned within a couple of days, all right, but I'm still not allowed to play in the house. I did manage to claim a corner of the shed as my own and kept up learning and playing, including getting lessons from old Wally Ellison over in West Bay Road. He was a lot more patient than my wife and her dog. Wally even got me trying to learn some Gaelic. He said knowing some would help me get the music better, referring several times to playing in the old style, though I never quite learned for sure what he meant by that. I also started playing while walking, thinking it might reconnect me with my pipe band days. Sometimes I paced and played on the deer trails behind the house. Once I thought I was a little better, I tried walking along the shore of the cove. I've not heard it expressed by anyone else, but the pipes have a curious effect of both evoking and assuaging isolation. Does that make any sense? Whether it's completely natural or complete nonsense, I couldn't say. But my romantic self, the inner Gael maybe, came to see my solitary parades as time in the bank. I did find it odd, though, that not one person here ever commented on my solo concerts. I didn't think they were that bad, but so far as I could tell, I was playing only to the geese and the gulls that call the landing home. Now, I'm not really saying that they could relate to me or my music, but I did take comfort in the fact that they didn't fly away. Wally once told me that the Gaelic was more nature-oriented than the English. He said that the beauty of the language is because it's infused with the landscape. I guess that's why the early Gaelic immigrants got along so well with the Mi'kmaq. They shared respect for the land on which they were dependent, and it comes out in their languages. Quite often, depending on the weather, when I paused between tunes, the final refrain would echo from the hills behind the village. It was like a faraway piper. A Sheehan piper was playing along, or depending on my mood or level of self-confidence in the moment, perhaps it was mocking me. But my readings of pipe lore often recounted stories of pipers receiving tunes in dreams, or being kidnapped by fairies and remembering their tunes. In my imagining, it was the trees and the distant corries that influenced the natural flourishes I was learning to incorporate. I took my time and I listened, reveling in nature's revisions, respecting them, practicing them, growing my feel for the tunes, and perfecting my piping vocabulary by letting nature into my technique. I punned that I was incrementally adding real dirt to my playing. That's an expression. Dirt is an expression used by fiddlers and pipers alike for the flutters and flourishes added spontaneously to a tune, extra notes, half notes, that showcase a player's mastery. Nature's echo was helping me find my dirt. Wally said I was slowly getting the old style. Then the echo stopped. which I found peculiar. Whenever the wind had been from the north, the pipes hadn't answered, of course, but this was different. Something in the landscape had changed. There was no answering refrain, not even on a calm, crisp, cool evening. That silence may have contributed to the decision to try and form an interest group, a sort of piping circle. I don't know, maybe it was a vain desire to hear myself echoed. But I wasn't so cocky as to think I could teach something I had only recently learned myself. I was so high on what I had accomplished through the application of time and patience that I wanted to share it with others, especially with others my age. It'd be more of a social thing. More importantly, I wanted to see a revival. The old-timers are gone, the language all but forgotten. Only the music remains, and sadly, that too could fade if no one makes time for it. So I made up an announcement, and I took it to the post office. I don't know how we managed to still have a real post office in the Landing. There seems hardly enough people to support it, though the numbers of seasonal residents are increasing. It's a throwback to better days, but it's vital to preserving life in the area. The social hitching post where people take a little time, catch up on local news, meet long unseen neighbors, and seek or offer help in exchange. The post office has an overflowing bulletin board, faded pieces of paper advertise lawn mowing and snow removal, firewood, fresh honey or tailoring, lemonade stands and meals on wheels, alongside benefits, bingos, and chase the ace. I surveyed the notices to find something out of date that I could either remove or cover over, and I was struck to find a small, soiled card in an elderly hand that I had not noticed before. It read, "Piper wanted." That ends the first installment of MacTalla, The Echo, and I hope you'll take it up in part 2 when you get a chance. Thanks for listening so far.